So I'm telling you, the next place to be bombed will be Kyiv, and you will bomb Kyiv. You will. It's written in your plans. NATO's plans already include the bombing of Kyiv, and there's even a date set. And you still don't know. You still naively smile like children. You think, no, that won't happen. It will happen. And the Baltics will be different too. Look, they've already fled from the Baltics. They're already packing their suitcases. See, the correspondents are already scared. They've already run away. They understand how their mockery of Russians will end for them. It must be said in advance that the war will take place on the territory of Ukraine, over Crimea and the Caucasus. The West will support the Armenians against Baku, and conversely, will support Tbilisi against Abkhazia. Look, Abkhazia is like Kosovo. But now the West will do the opposite. Shevardnadze is like Milosevic. Shevardnadze is now suppressing by force freedom in Abkhazia. And he is ready to destroy Abkhazia. And he has already sent troops into Sukhumi. But here the West will play the opposite role. It will help Shevardnadze suppress the Abkhazians, because Shevardnadze helped in the destruction of the Eastern Bloc. There, it's either Russians or Crimean Tatars. There are no Ukrainians in Crimea. That will be a good card for another NATO adventure. I am already greeting them in advance and saying to all of them, to the NATO generals, well done, go ahead and act. Bomb Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa and Crimea, and we will enter Crimea from the east. The Russians had the right to bomb Grozny, NATO had the right to bomb Kosovo, and we will bomb Crimea and Kyiv together. If the Kyiv leadership cannot understand what their policies have led to, that the Crimean Tatars already today have their own armed forces, their own mini parliament. In 5 years, they will seize Crimea with Turkey's help. But in Kyiv, they don't understand this. But NATO will do it. I'm telling you this. Here, in the center of Europe, NATO has no other plans except waging war. And the main goal is war with Russia. But they are afraid to do it directly. That's why they will bomb the periphery, the Caucasus, the Balkans, the Middle East, the Far East. They won't go directly against Russia, but will apply pressure through Ukraine, through Belarus, through the Baltics, through the Caucasus. This is the general trend. That's what Napoleon did. But he was honest. He went directly at Russia. He came, burned Moscow, and returned. Hitler did the same, honestly. He went straight to Moscow with tanks, but he didn't succeed. NATO is being cunning. They have the same goal, to seize Russia, to destroy Russia. Everything that Hitler wanted, they have already done. The dismemberment of the Soviet Union, the suppression of the economy, the destruction of the army. In other words, everything Hitler wanted, NATO has already accomplished by about 70%. Only the NATO flag has yet to fly over Moscow. NATO will keep moving eastward. Let them move, and faster. I told Clark back in Barcelona, start bombing earlier. You could have finished bombing that year already. Today, the situation will be different. It doesn't matter for Russia. You don't need much force to reach the button. You reach out, press it, and the birds fly off to a certain region. And then there's nothing left in that region. That's why you don't need much force. Our weapon sits not like you need soldiers, or Zhukov there, or combat operations. Today, well, NATO bombed for a few months. Same thing here. What stopped the Serbs from buying our air defense systems? No one stopped them. They were stingy. A miser pays twice. They should have bought air defense systems, and all the NATO planes would have ended up at the bottom of the Adriatic Sea. There are still oddballs in Moscow who think about a strategic alliance with Beijing. Beijing is an enemy of Russia. Moscow officials can't understand this, because in Beijing, the communists are in power. They still think that the Chinese communists will show more solidarity with the remnants of the Russian communists. No, the Chinese are more like nationalists. They would gladly seize our primary, the Far East. So, of course, the psychological factor is very significant. And what is happening in the Balkans is a rehearsal for what the West wants to do to Russia. The dismemberment of Russia, the separation of the Far East, the separation of the Volga region, the Caucasus. And all of this is under the banner of protecting human rights or defending national minorities. Those who are smiling today can't understand this. But tomorrow, they themselves will be refugees in their own country. So don't impose the Western model on Russia. It doesn't fit. The West is a wonderful continent, good for them. They're such marvelous barbarians. They started many wars, burned half the planet and robbed half the planet. Good for them. That's right. Hit the weak. Hit the weak. That is, the West lives on other people's money. This continent lives off other people's money. It is artificial. It really is, in a way, decaying. In this sense, Lenin, whom I never respect, and I can't wait for his corpse to be removed from Red Square, but he was right. The West is a decaying continent, a parasitic continent dying, and it torments the whole world. It lives well because the whole planet suffers. 6 billion people suffer so that 500 million here can live in luxury, drink champagne, sit in beautiful halls, discuss peace, and at the same time send their troops to the east. The West has always waged all the wars. All wars originated from Europe. Never in the world has one country attacked another. All wars were provoked by the West, from the Crusaders to the most recent Balkan War. They went east to plunder, kill, burn, and commit violence. All of this was done by the West, and it will answer for this, because it will perish anyway. But let the West see what an independent Baltic is like. Otherwise, they kept thinking that we were occupying someone, exploiting someone, and draining resources from someone. On the contrary, Russia supplied them, supported them, and today the entire CIS is dependent on Russia. If we stop supplying them with our goods and our energy, the whole CIS is worth nothing, especially the Baltics. They have nothing, absolutely nothing of their own that they could produce. It would be best to shut down the nuclear power plant in the Baltics. Oil refineries, close the oil refineries, and switch to horse-drawn transport. On horses, they took the horses into the forest. They brought firewood from the forest to the city and sold it to the townspeople. Let the Balts live off of that. Let them live like that. We're not interfering with them. Go ahead. And we don't need Baltic resorts. It's cold there. Only 17 degrees. We have resorts where it's 30 degrees for next to nothing. Let those Estonians relax there, along with the Finns and Swedes. Why aren't they coming to you? The Swedes, the Finns, for some reason they're not coming. They're supposed to be brotherly, close nations, but they don't want to help the so-called suffering peoples of the Baltic. So we're not interfering with you. But if Russians are mistreated in Latvia or Estonia, you'll have to answer for it. You will have to. And the time will come when NATO or some other military organization will decide to bomb both Riga and Tallinn for the mistreatment of national minorities. Just like what's happening in Kosovo today, we too will gladly bomb your cities for mistreating national minorities. You must stop the abuse. You have closed clinics for our veterans of the Great Patriotic War. You beat them. You are shutting down Russian schools. You don't provide medical care. You don't give them jobs. This is outright genocide. Outright genocide. That's why, in a few years, we will have the right, together with NATO or as part of another military bloc, to bomb Riga and Tallinn. I would gladly help with that, to bomb Riga and Tallinn. We will do it because of the way you mistreat national minorities. Treat all minorities well, always and everywhere. In other words, we are ready to use Western values for democracy and peace, but through war, just like the West does. The West bombs first, then talks about democracy. So now we will bomb Riga and Tallinn, and then talk about democracy for the Estonians, the ones who are left, those who remain. The rest will have time to escape to Finland or to Est or to Sweden. You're welcome.